Thank you for auditing the always positive new music review show hosted by a French professor who's going to be reviewing Magic by Nas. I give up. I give up. Nas, I'm apologizing. Nas fans, I'm apologizing. You see, when I started this channel, I didn't know that much about sort of like discourse, modern discourse, online discourse about hip-hop. So when I first reviewed a Nas album, talking King's Disease 1, I came out with what I thought was a fairly hot take, which was that Nas was overrated. And I kind of maintained this, and I discussed it while giving him respect as recording some of, one of the best rap albums of the 90s, being It Was Written, talking about how he made one of the most perfect songs in hip-hop history, Made You Look, so I was trying to show respect while also fundamentally holding on to this position that he was overrated. I didn't know, but I learned quickly that saying Nas is overrated is some kind of weird, code for being some kind of toxic hip-hop fan, some kind of, weird, racist, angry, position to hold. So, I meant it honestly. I just meant, hey, I just think Nas is overrated. I don't think he's top 5. I'm just going to say that. So I, first of all, officially take back anything having to do with Nas being overrated from that perspective. I don't want to take part in any kind of weird Rick and Morty 4chan hip-hop discussion here. But beyond the fact that I don't want to hold that position in a sort of public way and embrace Nas hate, also, objectively, it's just wrong. Now, I'm not saying that my position has changed in terms of my personal taste. Nas is still not in my personal top 10 in terms of what I like. But does he objectively belong in the top 10? Yes. Does he objectively belong in the top 5? Yes. And I think between these last 3 albums, he's making a very, very, very strong case. A stronger case than I believe he has made previously that he does belong at number 1. What I love about Magic is that it is outside of this trilogy, The King's Disease trilogy. So if you don't know, 2 years ago he released, so it's 2021, but I'm pretending that it's 2022 already. So in 2020 he released King's Disease, 2021 he released King's Disease 2, and then he's going to release King's Disease 3 next year. But right here we have just sandwiched in this little short album. It is my favorite Nas album, besides For It Was Written. It has an urgency. It has a feeling like Nas is releasing this, not because he's trying to establish that he's number 1, not because he's trying to make enough money to pay gambling debts or something, I don't know what, but because he has to. There's an urgency, a hunger, that is a hunger to the art, not a hunger to the respect, not a hunger to his place, not a hunger for money, but just because he needs to. He is all set for recognition when it comes to this King's Disease. Okay, he's already won 1 Grammy. He might win a second. He might go 3 for 3. He is starting to, as they say, get his flowers. He's starting to be recognized for what he's doing. And that was part of what bothered me about the first King's Disease project, is it felt a little bit too much like he just released something that was solid but not spectacular so that people could finally recognize what he did in the past that was spectacular. But how could I possibly now say all of a sudden that Nas might deserve that top spot over Jay-Z? Well, Jay-Z has to do something. He needs to do more. My hope is that Nas doing this will light a fire under Jay-Z's feet so that he does more. When we think about rappers of the 90s, the sort of golden age of hip-hop, at least if you're a 44-year-old white dude from the suburbs, the golden age of hip-hop was in the 90s, not coincidentally, when I was in my early 20s, late teens. When we think about who's still making music from that era, when I think about the greats of that time, obviously Tupac and Biggie and Mobb Deep are no longer making music because they are mostly dead. Snoop Dogg is a spokesman. Busta Rhymes released a great album, but still there's a kind of weird sort of sadness to it. Ghostface Killah is still releasing great project after great project. The rest of the Wu-Tang is not quite as strong, maybe Inspector Deck, but still the thing that happens, and what I find fascinating, is what do we do with old rappers? Like how do we... Hip hop itself is so alive, right? That's part of what makes hip hop so amazing. Ever since it started, it's been the zeitgeist, the spirit of the times. It's been the driving cultural force in the world, essentially since it began. When an art is as alive as it is, it requires now. It requires the moment. It requires not necessarily youth, but it does require the urgency, the flexibility, the vitality of youth. So what do you do with old rappers? It turns out, in the 90s, the answer was forget old rappers and pretend like they don't exist, put them on a little ice floe and shove them off to Antarctica to die like Frankenstein's monster, okay? That's what happened. So when I was a kid, I would listen to Houdini and the Fat Boys, and by the time I was in high school, I don't know what they were doing, but they might have been working, at Walmart, right? They were not supported by the culture. Now that this golden age is getting older, they are able to maintain more relevance. And the issue is, old rappers, old heads, I guess is the term that we like to use, fall into these traps. And these traps are things which I really hate. Because in order for an old rapper to succeed, they can't just play the card of, I am a legend. Like, you can be legendary, but your position can't be, I am a legend. Because in that statement of, I am a legend, is saying that something is over, that you no longer have to keep working, that your previous success is an indicator for future relevance. So these old heads, they have three primary issues, like rap albums made by people who've been around for more than a decade. The most important one is looking down on the now, looking down on what's happening right now, seeing rappers doing what they're doing now and assuming that it used to be better back in my day. The second thing they do is they talk too much about the then. So they look down on the now and talk too much about the then, what rappers were big, what the fashion was like, what it was like back in the old days. It's a little bit too much just for old people to reminisce, as opposed to being the lifeblood of the entire culture of the entire world. That's maybe a little bit of an exaggeration, but the primary motor of culture in the world. And then the other thing is sort of quoting the golden age. This is my number one pet peeve. This is something that has bothered me with Nas. What I like about this project is only once do you hear that Nas, like the half man, half amazing, like the Nas quote. I don't even know where it comes from. You can tell me in the comments, because Nas fans are very serious about loving Nas. Very mad at me for saying he's overrated. I officially recant that. Nas is not overrated, although he's not always to my taste, for reasons which I will explain in this video. But quoting the golden era is something that drives me crazy. Biz Markie, as you may or may not know, is one of my favorite rappers, and his last couple albums, going all the way back to the 90s, were way too filled with him discussing how much, quoting himself and quoting the ways, quoting old things that he said back in the old days. The problem is that old men are just kind of terrible, and I know because I'm an old man. Old men tend to hold on to old things, tend to think, you see the guys who wear a shirt that say old guys rock. It's not really true. Old guys don't really rock. Old guys are just trying to hold on to something that's past them. What makes this album by Nas so great, and King's Disease 2, King's Disease 1 I didn't think was that great, but really these last two projects have been much better. He uses the past as a subject, but not the subject. He's using his age as a way to talk about being closer to death, and he uses his age as a source of wisdom. This is why Nas is best placed to get old. What is it that Nas is famous for? Being wise. When Illmatic came out, he was 20 whatever, and he seemed like an old man. He seemed so wise. So, here we have this artist who's aging, who's wise, who's using his wisdom. And how could I possibly say that he could topple Jay-Z? I'll never like him as much. But what's Jay-Z done? I mean, Nas is knocking it out the park with these projects and working. Even the project he did with Kanye was great. You know, he's really working and he really has that hunger. And who else has that hunger? What other rap legends have ever had that hunger? I mean, in 20 years, is Kendrick Lamar going to release 3 albums in the span of 12 months? I don't know, but it's really nice to hear, especially when he's joined by Hit Boy, who's just one of the great producers. I mean, his greatness is so subtle because it's not like he has some trademark that nobody else has ever thought about. You know, he just makes very solid, very good beats, and matched with it is the lyrics of Nas. And on this album, more than any other, I just want to keep quoting. I want to tell you every lyric on the entire album because it's all quotable and it's all good. But let me give you an example. I'm going to start my stamp for the album, my homework, the song you should listen to get an example of why Nas is so amazing, is the first track, Speechless. I'll include a link to it up there. First of all, Hit Boy, maybe his best beat on the album. This high ringing guitar. Underneath, there's this kind of like unsettling, tight guitar-based beat with just a single bass note on the 2. So 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. A weird place to put the bass sound. There's a great change in the beat in the chorus where it seems to reverse the sample from the verse. This great swirling sound at the end, which leads into the next verse. Everything seems to be swirling and dancing around and have this weird kind of atmosphere. And then while you have all this, and then we have Nas's just insanely tight, great verse after verse after verse. Before he even gets into the verse, he announces the whole project by saying, "I don't even know what's going on no more. Ain't no answers." I love this humility. He's not saying, I know what's going on and these young people are stupid and I'm smart because I'm old and I'm smart. He's saying, I don't know what's going on anymore. He's trying to figure it out. And the song is very much about his journey. How did he get here? He opens up the entire album with his opening verse, which he does in kind of a, you know, when I try to describe to people what is it that makes something sound old school, you know, like before, even before the 90s, it's how well pronounced the words are. Very overpronounced flow. To start this off, I'm 21 years past the 27 club. So just immediately starts talking about how he didn't get killed when he was 27, although of course neither Tupac nor Biggie made it to 27, nor Big L. Most rap stars don't make it to the 27 club, which is a sad fact. It's like when I went back into my past and then I sped it up. Robert Johnson, Winehouse, and Morrison found where heaven was, heaven on earth, this ish is magic with no fairy dust, home of the gully gangsta, the gruesome, the scary stuff. So just his ability with words, home of the gully gangsta, the gruesome and scary stuff, just what a, like the rich rhyme with fairy dust and scary stuff. Fairy dust, scary stuff. You know, his mastery, and it is his mastery. Nas is not overrated. Maybe that will be my my thumbnail here. Fairy dust, scary stuff, and then before that scary stuff, we have the alliteration with the G sounds: gully, gangsta, gruesome. Gully, gangsta, gruesome, scary stuff. Fairy dust is beautifully constructed. He's also good with a punchline. He says there's only three things are undefeated. Only thing undefeated is time. The second is the internet. The third is this rhyme. What a fun idea to say that the internet is undefeated. I think it's true. The chorus is more of that overpronounced old school style. He also, it's interesting because he makes references to talking about making content for Viacom, which I suppose is maybe making music videos back in the day, because he signed to Sony, and Sony's not owned by Viacom, but MTV is. I don't know what it is, but there is a kind of knowledge of his place in the corporate hierarchy. It's that wisdom that we talk about, where he's not just making money, he's aware that he's making money for other people. And then the chorus is a fairly standard Nas-style chorus of talking about where he came from. I come from dope dealers, street hustlers, pop cases, throw dice on pavement, cop chases. But the whole song, all the way through, it's the best of Hit Boy. It's the best of Nas. I love the fact that this feels, almost like the way that, I talk a lot about Makami, the way he has his great tentpole albums and then he has his EPs that he dumps on the world. I love the lightness of this project, how it just feels like it's not trying to be part of a trilogy. It's just, oh, oops, did I just release a classic album at the end of the year after everyone already made their best of lists? Did I just, oops, oops, here's some of the best rhymes and some of the best beat of the year. That's what this project is. Next song is called Meet Joe Black. I need to take a sip of my coffee before I discuss the movie Meet Joe Black. The movie where Brad Pitt plays Death and Claire Forlani continues to be the most underrated actress in the 90s. A very funny reference, Meet Joe Black just means meet death. Great cinematic horn opener on the beat, and the beat settles into something that's kind of lowish synth line, more of a swirling beat again. But what I love is the duration of this sample, of this beat, where it just lasts over several bars. And then a great chorus where Nas is having fun, playing with rhythm. Run me the keys, run me the bees, run me that flow back. You top three, I'm not number one. How could you post that? He's not doing simple triplet flow. He's not doing anything that's prescribed. He's just creating this interesting rhythm within this chorus. Run me the keys, run me the bees, run me that flow back. Your top three, I'm not number one. How could you post that? Or where the crown, the city is mine. You cannot hold that. I'm not the one to go at. You F around. Meet Joe Black. It's great. Catchy, funny, interesting, and once again, he himself is talking about how losers on the internet constantly say he's overrated. Losers, like me. Some old references in here. Beyond Meet Joe Black, he has a beautiful verse where he talks about house N-words. I can't quote it because I'm in no position to discuss that issue, being, white. But it's one of the best verses on the album, which I would quote if I didn't have to censor myself so much for good reasons. And then at the end, we have one of my favorite parts of the album, and that is the meta-analysis of Nas's position in hip-hop. There's a sample of Soulja Boy saying Nas killed hip-hop when he said hip-hop is dead. This prompted me to really go on an interesting journey in my mind about this album, Hip-Hop is Dead. Okay? So, this album came out, 2007, 2008? Was it 2008? I can't read anymore, my glasses. 2006. So, I remember buying this album. I was excited because it had Black Republicans with Jay-Z. I was happy that beef was over. And I love this idea of hip-hop is dead. I was 29 when this album came out. I was way past my mid-20s music death. And this was where I turned on Nas. Now, it's not one of his best albums. It's not a bad album either. But I recognized that it's not cool to say hip-hop is dead. It's just not. Like, hip-hop is alive. You're dead. You know what I mean? Like, that's the whole thing about this whole channel is as I'm getting older, I'm trying to insist on the fact that if you think music is dead, it's just that you're dying. That's all. A way to stay alive, a way to stay vital is to figure out the reasons that Playboi Carti is just as good as Nas. If you can't figure that out, then your body is dying. Your mind is dying, right? Now I'm pissing people off. People are going to call me a vamp again. Whatever that means. And what's the W? Why does everyone post W? What does that even mean? Are those like the fangs of a vampire? Was that why people post W? I don't know. I'm an old man. But when he made this album, Hip Hop is Dead, I bought it and I liked it, and part of me was like, yeah, that's right, Nas, it is dead, man. I remember what it used to be like. I remember seeing De La Soul in concert, and they would sit there and they would scream at the audience for not paying attention to the old school, and they would say hip hop is dead. But really, this was the point where hip hop almost died. It almost died because the old school, the people who were the leaders of the new school, right? Not the band, but the actual leaders of the new school of the art were coming out and saying that it was dead. And it was an old man position. This is a grumpy old man album. This is saying, it's not good anymore. It used to be good. And Soulja Boy calling him out on it is a good point because Soulja Boy is part of what helped hip hop to evolve. Hip hop can't stay the same. It can't stay stuck in the golden age. If it stays stuck in the golden age, it becomes a legend. It will become the blues or rock and roll or any other genre which is constantly either dead or on the stage of dying. And what's fascinating is I think this is in a better context. If we put this album, we compare this with a song from a couple years later, Death of Autotune by Jay-Z. We have both Jay-Z and Nas, two of the greatest to ever do it, talking about this death and about not liking these changes and not adapting to the changes. And it's only when you go with the changes, when you build with the way the culture is changing, that you stay alive. So that's maybe why I turned on Nas. I think it might be because when he said hip hop is dead, I agreed with him. And when I agreed with him, I recognized that's a bad look. It's funny. The lyrics to hip hop is dead went from turntables to MP3s, from Beat Street to commercials on Mickey D's. It's true. A couple things. MP3s, it's funny, right? Because now we're in streaming. So turntables to streaming. MP3s seem quaint by comparison. From Beat Street to commercials on Mickey D's. Hey, Nas, you not only are, I think he's still a spokesperson for Hennessy. He even mentions VSOP on this album. He also did Sprite commercials. You know, I don't think you can play the whole, like, people sold out, like, when you sold out. Ugly is the next track. A beautiful, deep, meaningful song with this compressed soul sample. Soul sample very, very chopped up and nice. Thanks to Lyric Genius, I understand better that ugly refers to, like murders in the inner city. And it was pretty clear when he's talking about the atmosphere out there, about the whole opening verse is about these murders and about, when he says it's ugly out there, he's saying that people are being shot. There's an amazing line in here where he says companies profit off of black trauma. This is one of the great ambiguous things about studying and loving hip-hop, right? Sony, Viacom, Bertelsmann Music Group. All these groups profit off of the black trauma that is being described. Now, of course, it is better to have representations of black trauma, to address black trauma, to allow it to be spoken about and not hidden and not known. But at the same time, Nas is right. And he's bringing up this whole idea. So while he's talking about black trauma, which is what this is about, he references Big L, who was shot. He references Jam Master Jay being shot. He references Young Dolph and even Marvin Gaye. You know, all these people who died to gun violence. He is also profiting Sony through his rhymes. Ambiguous and smart. He also makes reference to Mr. Ugly Man, Marlon Wayans, in Living Color. And this is where I just can't help it. Okay, I'm sitting here telling you how rappers have to be agile and they can't be old men and all that. But I love a good Living Color reference. I don't understand why we don't talk more about Living Color as a cultural phenomena. Like both Arsenio Hall and Living Color, we should just be talking about them more. As far as like African American culture reaching the mainstream, African American comedy changing the mainstream, but that's for another channel. 4016 building, a very cool deep soul sample, kind of propels it forward. Lots of 70s references, talking about the 70s. He does a little bit of the thing of like saying how cool he is and how influential he is. I got so many kids in the game, it's like gender revealing. But what I love is just how relentless he is. And this quote that he says a couple times, I don't buy the hype, I'm in the studio lately. And this is, again, why I think Nas deserves to maybe even be at that number one spot objectively, not subjectively, because he's still not in my personal top 10, for reasons I will give soon. But I love this idea that I'm in the studio lately, that he's still working, he's not resting on his laurels. Hollywood Gangster is a very cheery beat, nice sample, kind of light. And he opens it up with giving a shout out to drill rappers in New York, which I really appreciate, as opposed to being Hip hop is dead. It used to be cool, but now it's not. Death of auto tune, no idea on the track. Instead of that, it's like, hey, shout out to these people making stuff that I can't make, or I don't know how to make, or I don't make. Opens with a very nice conscious verse. The scars of martyrs, the path of bastard seeds, effects of absentee fathers passed on with ease. Hope the babies eat healthier, and may we get wealthier. A gorgeous, gorgeous line. Effects of absentee fathers passed on with ease. It's just a beautiful line. Woo for the Children is the next song. Gentle soul sample, kind of a pitch voice in the back. Hit Boy is just really... I wrote he's in the cut. I don't know, that's an old style term. But it seems that both Hit Boy and Nas are sort of ducks in water. Like, they're just sort of like producing this great quality music, and it doesn't feel like they're trying super hard. It seems like they're really connected. I like how he begins it by saying, I don't work this hard to be around people I don't like. Pretty funny. A kind of a, old 90s reference, a little bit of his going back to the past. I should have won a Grammy when Old Dirty Bastard said Woo was for the Children. I should have went on the Biggie remix. He does say that Jay, Nas, and Biggie is like Drake, Cole, and Kenny. I think he is very knowledgeable of the internet and the discourse around him. So who is who in Jay, Biggie, and Nas with Drake, Cole, and Kenny? First of all, saying that is a huge compliment to these three new rappers. I think it's very clear to me that Nas would be J. Cole, because I don't get J. Cole. Like, I like him well enough, but I didn't even review his album, and everyone tells me he's great. So he must be the new Nas, because apparently I'm sleeping on him. Wave Gods is the only track featuring anybody. It features DJ Premier, which is just he scratches up the beat a little bit. It seems a little bit unnecessary. It's okay, but it's maybe my least favorite part of the album because it takes too much away from Hit Boy. DJ Premier is such a god that to have him on a song with Hit Boy, like this is Hit Boy's show. And then A$AP Rocky, who I'll talk more in a second. And then we get to why is Nas not in my top 10? He directly says in this song that Nas and Hit Boy are the new Gang Starr. And he even says at some point, monotone style like Guru on some primo cuts. So if you don't know, Gang Starr is a rap group, partly out of Boston, partly out of New York. I mean, they're really out of New York, but they have some roots in Boston as well, which you think, being from Boston myself, I would find an attachment to them. DJ Premier was the DJ and the producer. Guru was the rapper. They pioneered a lot of work in jazz and hip hop, very conscientious raps, considered by many to be like the best or one of the best old school rap acts in the world. And I have never particularly liked them. I like Premier's production a lot. His style of super chopping up samples to getting around copyright clearance and all that. But Guru, I've never particularly liked that much. I don't think he's bad. I don't dismiss him. I just never really liked his voice. And when Nas says monotone style like Guru, I realize that's all it is. It's the monotone style. It's the voice timbre of Guru and the voice timbre of Nas, which I personally don't like. I like a little more character, a little more maybe lyricism, a little more melody in a voice, and that's it. So this song helped me to understand not only what is it that has kept me from loving Nas as much as I love Jay-Z, but what has kept me from loving Guru as much as I love Biz Markie. That's another example. A$AP Rocky is great here. I like the way he just seamlessly jumps into the song back and forth. Feels very organic and not calculated. That's one of the biggest issues with featurings, is just often it's just who is the best person to put on here. This doesn't feel like it's who's the best person to put on here. It's who's the right person to put on here. He also, Nas does make more old school references, talking about watching Cool G and Houdini. But then it ends with this interesting reflection on aging and dying. And I think that's one of my favorite parts about this album is he's not just talking about being old and that's why he's smart, but he's talking about being old and about that wisdom that comes with knowing that death is closer to you than it was before. Which if you're under the age of 30, at a certain point you realize you're going to die, and it sucks. And you think about it too much. And Nas is thinking about it too much and putting it to words. The next song is called The Truth, probably the second best track on the album. Very hard beat, this mysterious sample, at times taking out the drums. Has kind of a detuned guitar-like instrument. Reminds me a little bit of a Wu-Tang. Now this song, we might think as the most kind of old head song, because he's really emphasizing that new rappers don't tell the truth enough. Y'all don't look like the truth to us. Hype off that little dirt you did. Ain't ish to the kid. Whoa. And it's talking about Instagram and the influence of social media on sort of gangster rap and criminal rappers. A little bit, it is too preachy. He talks about listening to Snoop Dogg and Murder Was the Case and all that. A little too much talking about being in the past. A little bit about how things were better in the past and how rappers were more real in the past. Which, of course, rappers were not more real ever. That's part of the beauty of rappers, is that many of them are professional wrestlers, and many of them are recounting very, very true things that happened to them in their life. My argument is that it doesn't matter. That's my point. Everyone gets mad at me when I say that it doesn't matter if rappers do what they say they did. I don't think it matters if Jay-Z never sold crack. What if he made it all up? Then he did it awesome. Then he changed the world by making stuff up. What if, anyways. But I don't think that's what the song is about, because it's also very much about this meditation on death. You can't take it with you. Live alone, die alone. There's two things. Rappers these days don't talk about the truth, but also the truth is that we're all going to die. Maybe the best single one line I could give you for how his flow can be just so enrapturing. Poppy to Abu Dhabi probably parlay with the Saudis. Poppy to Abu Dhabi probably parlay with the Saudis. Poppy to Abu Dhabi probably parlay with the Saudis. Can you say that at home? I'm going to Dora the Explorer this. Can you say Poppy to Abu Dhabi probably parlay with the Saudis? Good. Amazing. Just awesome. The final track is called Dedicated. Cool kind of 70s soul beat with pitched voices in the beginning. I don't like the opening beat, but there's a beat switch, which I'll get to. Starts off with kind of a old school, like, it's magic. Magic is a theme that goes throughout this album, but is not hit over your head. And kind of like the King's Disease thing is a little too emphasized. I like how magic is just a theme talking about, and it is kind of magic what they're doing. It does feel like that effortlessness I'm talking about is shown to be a form of magic. He says he's black as Paul Mooney's slang. Very obscure and funny reference there. I really like this one verse here. I see a lot of people try to be who they ain't. We don't want the money that fit in the bag. We want the bank. Just spread it around like icing on a cake. White tiger out the cage. Mike Tyson in '88. So Mike Tyson in '88 as the epitome of menace and cool and perfection in violence. He's Mike Tyson in '88. And I like this, we don't want the bag, we want the bank. And then later he talks about people ask him what books to read. Yeah, people ask me what books to read. And as somebody who's a professor on YouTube, people ask me all the time, what books should I read? And that always kind of troubles me, because it's not so much like what one book can you read, but more like what kind of outlook can you have, or what perspective can you gain through reading. Like, that's what interests me the most. So that's why I tend to say things like methodologies of art, or beginning critical theory, or an etymology dictionary to better understand words, or an art history book to better understand the history of art and culture throughout the centuries. I try to have a sort of a bigger view of things, as opposed to just saying, read Proust. Side note, read Proust. And what I love is he says, destruction of black civilization, that's history. Journal of Christopher Columbus, that's what interests me. So what he's saying is, it's not like one book that you have to read. It's about history and its relationship to the current day. Christopher Columbus's journal is fascinating. It does lay the groundwork for most of the atrocities that would follow. And that's what interests him. Very simple chorus about dedicating his life. I like this because it's the old head, but he's not saying like, I'm the old head and you all owe me and all that, but just saying this is what he dedicated his life to. And then a beautiful beat change, kind of darker sounds, grimy, orchestral, and moody. And he says he might have to write a manuscript, pure magic, no tricks. this great yo sound sampled every once in a while in the back. It's a great project. It's a great album. I will never again say that Nas is overrated. Saying Nas is overrated is dead. I will continue to say that he's not one of my favorites. And it's okay if you don't like that. That's okay. We all have different tastes. You know? I mean, I'm a vamp. You know, I'm a young guy. These are my Patreons. I don't usually show them every episode, but I made this awesome thing. So if you go to my Patreon and you and you give me money, I use that to buy music. And I'm telling you, I might buy Magic. This is the most I've enjoyed a Nas album in a long time. I think I even like it more than the Kanye one. Okay, until next time, for everything. There's the camera.